Hello, folks. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania. Once again, an update on this refugee situation in South Africa. There is no policy, there is no program promulgated by the Department of State and Homeland Security as of this date, Friday, the 21st of February, 2025. 2 weeks after President Trump issued an executive order on the 7th of February, indicating that Afrikaners suffering from racial discrimination would be allowed to come to America in a prioritized manner as refugees, granted refugee status. That remains to be seen what that is. The Twitter sphere, YouTube, all the social media just blowing up. People talking about this all the time. I've urged caution from people to calm down. You've got people misleading you, telling this will take years. Other people telling you all kinds of advice. And there are people out there trying to get money from you. Becoming a refugee, getting refugee status to America doesn't cost money. So if that's coming at you, a lawyer or someone offering to put paperwork in for you, it's utter nonsense. Also, a lot of people are, once again, as I said, reading the requirements, and they read the first thing they see that suits their worldview, and they go from there and tell you this is how it is. Well, it's a lot more complicated than people make it out to be. But at its base level, it's actually very simple. You will not have to most likely prove that you have been discriminated against if you're in the class of people. You just have to prove you're in the class of people. So there you go. That'll be decided. So let's talk about cost and money, because that's an important part of this consideration. Normally refugees, the image of a refugee is somebody fleeing from Darfur to get to Chad and staying for years in a camp, in a tent, in a refugee camp, or huge camp, the largest one in the world, which is located in Kenya, full of Somalis. Hundreds of thousands, 500,000 people or more in that camp, been there for years. That's where they live. That's where they grow up. Their entire life is there in a refugee camp. There are 7.6 million refugees currently registered with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in Africa alone. 7.6 million. The United States in 2023 took in as many as 40,000 of those refugees. That's a big disparity, 7.6 million, 40,000. Now, in the case of South Africa, the program as a whole has been frozen since January 20th by the president, and nobody's coming to America, at least for the first 90 days from that date forward. The South Africans have been given priority, so if and when the program starts up again, either it'll start because of South Africa or it'll be just for them or it'll start for everybody, and they'll be at the front of the queue. We don't know. We'll find out. But people are talking about cost. First off, you don't pay a lawyer for this. It's refugee application, not asylum, not immigration. You don't need an immigration lawyer. There's nothing to do with them. The United States will either see you themselves for the interview and do the background checks, or they'll hire a third party to do it, and you'll go to them, and then they'll refer them to the State Department. That's how it works. All right, so let's talk about it. You don't have to come with a lot of cash. In fact, you can't take much cash out of many places when you leave, if you even have any cash. So there are means to get people to the States. The cost of transportation to the United States is provided to refugees in the form of an interest-free loan from the International Organization of Migration. Now, refugees don't get a free pass. It's not a grant. It's an interest-free loan. You have to pay it back, and over time, usually that starts 6 months after your arrival. But if you don't have enough money after 6 months, you can get a deferral based on your personal circumstances. So reception and placement is funded by the U.S. government. All those services take place over here. There are national resettlement organizations that maintain a nationwide network of approximately 300 affiliated offices in 202 communities around the country to provide services for refugee resettlement. None of that comes out of your pocket. That's all provided by the U.S. government to these organizations who take care of it. It's a well-developed NGO community. Now, what about cash in your pocket? So refugees aren't eligible for some programs, but oddly some are, and it's strange. So I can't tell you your individual case. Each case is different, but I can tell you generally the categories of things that are available. It's a matter of public record. Refugees who are not eligible for temporary assistance for needy families, TANF, which is welfare. Now, that generally requires citizenship for access, as is the case here in Pennsylvania. You must be a citizen in order to access that money. For those not eligible for TANF, or those pending receipt of supplemental security income, well, what is supplemental security income? That comes from the Social Security Administration and helps people who are disabled over the age of 65. Now, those not eligible for those two programs can receive Refugee Cash Assistance, RCA, upon arrival. And those who are not eligible for Medicaid are eligible to receive refugee medical assistance. Typically, someone not eligible for Medicaid is a able-bodied person who is younger than the retirement age. And so they wouldn't be eligible for Medicaid. And so they can get refugee medical assistance because you have to have resources to pay for medical care. Now, refugees are, under the law, authorized to receive RCA, the cash assistance, and RMA, the medical assistance, for up to 36 months after arrival. That's incredibly generous. Unfortunately, with the number of refugees that we take in, funding limitations have historically limited that to about 8 months of benefits. So keep that in mind. Even though they target 12 months, and in 2022, they were able to do it for 12 months, 8 months has been the norm. But if no one but South Africans are coming in, Depending on how many they let in, it might be longer. But by law, it's 36 months if funding's there. Now, how much money could you get from these programs? Well, if you qualify for the supplemental security income, if you qualify for supplemental security income, the maximum monthly SSI payment for 2025 is just $967 per month. That's about 17,500 Rand for an individual. That sounds like a lot if you live in South Africa, but that's not a lot of money in America. Most places, rent's going to cost you at least $1,000 a month for an apartment. You can find cheaper. If you're a couple, you get up to $1,450 per month from SSI. Now, this amount could be based lower if you have income or certain family members' income in your situation. So it's not going to go higher, though, but it could be lower. Refugee Support Services. Now, this is interesting. The Office of Refugee Resettlement, ORR, they have a support services program, which they fund states and replacement designees with funding. So this is money you oversee. It isn't money comes out of your pocket, but it comes out of U.S. taxpayers' pocket, and it funds these programs. Now, it's time limited, and refugees can only access these services for up to 5 years after arrival. Well, that's pretty generous. You can go back and get assistance for 5 years. They include employment services, on-the-job training, that's handy, English language instruction, vocational training, case management, translation, interpreter services, which are sometimes needed to fix documents and certifications and qualifications, social adjustment services, health-related services, home management, childcare, and even transportation. You can get that for up to 5 years after getting here. That is unbelievably generous, folks. I don't know what your thoughts on that, but I got to tell you that that's a huge gift from the American taxpayer for people coming as refugees, whether they come from Myanmar or from China, the Uyghurs, or they come from Venezuela or Haiti, Cuba, or South Africa. Wherever you come from, it's very generous. Now, the government breaks this down on allocations with an expectation of how many we can take in each year. Sometimes we take in 30,000 refugees, despite tens of millions of people on refugee status around the world. Sometimes we take in more, like when the Afghans came here on short notice, 160,000 flooded in our country in just a matter of days or weeks after Joe Biden's failed policy in Afghanistan caused chaos. But Africa, for 2024, the fiscal year, not the calendar year, fiscal year, which ended, the fiscal year 2024 allocation for all of Africa, of those 7.6 million that already exist, these are people registered with UNHCR or any other special case, which would be South Africa, 30 to 50,000 was all that were allowed to come in. So, as I said, 7.6 million refugees and asylum seekers. So that's a mix of asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are already here, so don't worry about that. The bottom line is that, that's, by the way, that's about a quarter of the global refugee population. So it's close to 30 million people who are refugees around the world. So let's talk about what you can get from these refugee cash assistance, okay? How much money you can possibly get from that. So the U.S. offers refugee cash assistance to refugees who arrive in the country. You may also be eligible for other services such as medical assistance, job placement, English language training, which I've already covered. Or some people may be eligible for Medicare, Medicaid, that sort of thing. Refugee cash assistance, as I said, you can get it for 3 years, but typically right now you get it for 8 months after arriving in the U.S. Now, the amount varies based on family size. Notice I said family size. So nuclear families, they try to relocate here. For example, a single person receives $230 a month, while a family of four receives $611 a month. Folks, that's not much money. That's not even going to pay your rent somewhere. So really, you're going to have a different source of income. This is why refugees are permitted to work and why you're encouraged to work. And given the fact that unemployment nationwide is hovering at 4% or slightly below it, finding work is not going to be difficult. Depending on what your field is, you should be able to find work pretty easy. And if you're willing to humble yourself and do something that's outside your field, you'll be able to find work instantaneously, almost anywhere in the country. Now, half of your household earnings are deducted from the grant if one or more of the adults are working. So if somebody in the family is actually working, they take half that money away. So if you got a family of four and you get $611 per month, which is a pittance, and one of you works, no matter what you make, whether it's $100 or $1,000 a month, they take half that. So you only get $305.50. Wow. If you're an individual who's been granted refugee status in the United States, you're eligible for federal mainstream non-Office of Refugee Resettlement benefits, such as cash assistance through the TAF program, which I mentioned, temporary assistance for needy families, supplemental security, Medicaid, food assistance through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, and you may be eligible for other cash assistance, medical assistance, employment preparation, job placement, or English language training courses for the services I mentioned that are offered through the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And that's for up to 5 years for those. So there are many sources of income and many sources of help for refugees who come to America. But here's the bottom line. You don't see a mass flow or any flow of refugees going back to their origin. Number one, because their lives are in jeopardy. They're being persecuted. Hence, they're here. And they're not starving to death. They're finding a way to make it. So I would not, if I were applying for refugee status and was granted to come to America, I wouldn't lose sleep over whether I'll succeed in America. Refugees do succeed in America. I'd be more concerned about what I have to abandon and leave behind because maybe you built something and you can no longer take it with you. Now, there's lots of ways around that if you're clever. Some people like cryptocurrency. I'm not telling you what to do with your life or what not to do with it. I am once again offering caution and a word of reason here. This program doesn't exist. It's in development until, if and when, until it's delivered. We can't tell you who can come to America, when they'll become America, what the timeline is. So if you're out there busy selling off all your resources in the expectation you're leaving South Africa in a week, you are not living in the real world. If you are listening to people telling you this will take 3 or 4 years, you have to pay thousands of dollars, and you won't make it in America, it's a systemically racist country, and they're just liars. None of what I just said was true. Those are all made up things. None of it's true. If you're a refugee, you don't pay for your travel here. You get an interest-free loan, or you can pay for your travel here potentially. Then you don't have to worry about the loan if you got the resources. Maybe you liquidate you get approved, you liquidate your holdings, and you've got cash, and you go and you buy a plane ticket, and then you don't have to worry about reimbursing the International Organization for Migration after the fact. Put you off to a better footing when you get here. Your circumstance is your circumstance. The point is that there is a plethora of programs and resources across the gamut, from translation services to childcare to transportation to income to medical care, that is made available for people. And once again, I will make this very clear. 92, 2 years old. The program doesn't care. Physics professor, ditch digger, don't care. You care for your future employment in America and how you're going to succeed. But the refugee program doesn't make distinctions. It's a refugee program for people in peril who are suffering persecution, and they can prove it, or people who fear persecution. In this case, by creating a special category or class of people, whether it's Afrikaners or ethnic minorities, however it's defined, the Trump administration with Trump's order is already taking care of one of those issues for you. It's determining that you are persecuted and you can flee to America. Now, how many will come? Who knows? Again, not my place to tell you to come, not my place not to tell you to come. Just my place to be honest with you, which many people aren't doing. What say you, South Africa, Mzansi, South Africa? What do you got to say? Feel free to leave a comment behind. And if you don't mind sharing this video, let people know about it. Cheers.